Declassified Coast Guard Report, file number 734, dated December 24th, 1925. Subject: the disappearance of keeper Elias Thorne from the Point Harbinger Lighthouse. A relief vessel, making its scheduled supply drop, found the station in a state of perfect order. The lamp was clean and lit. The table was set for a solitary dinner. The keeper's logbook was open on his desk. The only thing amiss was a single overturned chair. The main door and all windows were bolted shut from the inside. A thorough search of the rock and the surrounding waters yielded nothing. Keeper Thorne was a veteran of the service, a man known for his meticulous routine and unwavering discipline. Yet the official report concluded that he had simply vanished from a locked station. The case remains one of the service's most baffling and enduring unsolved mysteries. The official report, however, fails to mention the one detail the relief crew whispered about for years: the faint, mournful sound of someone whistling that seemed to come from the very stones of the empty lighthouse. Log entry, Day 1, Dr. Alani Keita, assigned to the Point Harbinger Automated Station for a 3-week diagnostic and upgrade. The locals at the dock called this place the Whistler's Rock. They told me the stories, of course. A keeper who vanished a century ago, a ghostly tune on the wind. Quaint, my job is not to chase ghosts. It's to ensure our new weather monitoring array is functioning. The lighthouse itself is a relic, a granite tomb with a modern automated heart. The isolation is total, which is perfect for my work. No distractions, no noise, but the wind and the sea. The silence up here is a blank canvas. It's beautiful. I'm a scientist. I believe in data, in patterns, in verifiable phenomena. The only thing that haunts this rock is the relentless screaming wind. The first night was uneventful. I spent hours calibrating the sensors, losing myself in the familiar comfort of data streams and diagnostics. I was packing up my equipment in the main lantern room, the huge glass lens rotating silently above me, casting its steady beam into the blackness. That's when I heard it. It wasn't the wind. The wind is a chaotic roar. This was a melody, a faint, simple, and impossibly sorrowful tune being whistled somewhere outside. It was a mournful, old-sounding sea shanty. I froze, straining to hear it over the sound of the waves crashing below. It seemed to dance on the wind, coming from every direction at once. I told myself it was an acoustic anomaly, the wind passing through a crack in the stone at a specific frequency. It had to be. But for a sound supposedly made by the wind, it sounded profoundly, heartbreakingly human. The station's historical artifacts are supposed to be kept in a sealed archive case in the lower level. The original keeper's logbook is the centerpiece of the collection. When I went down for a systems check the next morning, my blood ran cold. The heavy glass case, which I knew I had locked, was ajar, and the logbook, a thick leather-bound volume, was no longer in its display cradle. It was lying open on the floor in the center of the room. A single, heavy, overturned chair lay beside it. It was staged to look exactly like the official report. From 1925, I slammed the book shut, my hands trembling, my scientific detachment shattering. This wasn't the wind. This wasn't an anomaly. Someone or something was trying to get my attention. It was reenacting the scene of the disappearance, and it was casting me as the witness. I couldn't resist. I had to know what was inside. I took the logbook back up to the main room. Most of it was what you'd expect: weather reports, shipping logs, notes on maintenance. Meticulous, professional. But the entries from the final week of 1925 were different. The neat, disciplined handwriting grew frantic, shaky. He wrote of a silence that screams, and a loneliness so heavy it has a weight. He described feeling his own mind starting to fray from the absolute solitude. The final entry, dated the night he vanished, was just 3 words: scrawled with a desperate, heavy hand. The whistling has stopped. I stared at the page, a horrifying realization dawning on me. The whistling I was hearing, it wasn't the ghost of the man. It was the sound of the crushing loneliness he left behind. The ghost wasn't the man. The ghost was the silence. That night, the haunting became personal. I was working at my desk, the main lighthouse lamp casting its huge sweeping beam in a rhythmic cycle. Every 10 seconds, the beam would pass the windows, momentarily flooding the room with brilliant light, followed by deep darkness. I was hunched over my laptop when the light swept past again, and on the stone wall opposite me, for the brief second the room was illuminated. I saw it. 2 shadows, mine sharp and clear, and another, taller, thinner one, standing right behind me. A man's silhouette. My heart stopped. I waited, frozen, for the next sweep of light. 10 seconds felt like an eternity. Swoosh. There it was again. The shadow of a man standing just over my shoulder. I didn't scream. I didn't move. I just sat there, a prisoner in my chair, while the light swept by again and again, each time revealing the silent, watchful companion I could not see, but who was close enough to touch. The terror began to shift into something stranger, something more unsettling. He started to help. One night, a critical sensor on the exterior array went offline during a rising storm. I had to go outside onto the narrow, slippery parapet to fix it. I was struggling with a rusted bolt, my fingers numb from the cold, when a powerful gust of wind nearly tore the heavy wrench from my hand. I watched in horror as it slipped, and then just stopped, hovering in mid-air, a foot from the edge before, being gently placed back into my open toolkit. I stared at the wrench, then at the empty air around me. He wasn't trying to scare me. He was lonely. He was so desperately, profoundly lonely that he was interacting with the only other living soul. On his rock, in the only way he knew how, by sharing in the work. He was trying to be my colleague. A real storm hit on my final week, a monster that turned the sky black and the sea into a churning chaos of water and foam. The entire lighthouse shuddered with each wave that crashed against the rock. The power went out. I was plunged into absolute darkness, save for the rhythmic, sweeping beam of the emergency lamp. And in the darkness, the whistling was everywhere. It was no longer a faint tune. It was a loud, sorrowful, desperate cry against the rage of the storm. I could feel his presence filling the entire tower, his 100-year-old fear and my modern day terror merging into one. I saw him then, not as a shadow, but as a full, shimmering form. Elias Thorne. He was standing at the main window, his back to me, his translucent hands pressed against the glass as he stared out at the raging tempest. A silent, lonely guardian trapped in the memory of a storm just like this one. He was reliving the night he vanished. I felt an overwhelming urge to understand. I walked towards him, my hand outstretched, and I placed my hand on his old, open logbook. The world dissolved into a cacophony of roaring wind and whistling. I saw it all through his eyes. The storm of 1925. The crushing, absolute loneliness of his final days. The feeling of his own mind becoming as wild and unpredictable as the sea. He hadn't been taken by a wave. No one had taken him. In his final log entry, he wrote, "The whistling has stopped because he had finally stopped whistling to himself." The silence that followed was too much for his mind to bear. I saw him stand up, unlock the heavy door, and walk out into the full fury of the hurricane. Not to die, but just to feel something, anything other than the crushing weight of being utterly and completely alone. He wasn't swept away. He simply let the sea take him. The vision faded, leaving me on my knees, gasping, the open logbook in front of me. The storm outside had begun to calm. I looked up. The ghost of Elias Thorne was still there, but he had turned from the window. He was looking at me now, his sad, lonely eyes meeting mine. The whistling had stopped. He wasn't a terrifying specter anymore. He was just a man. A profoundly lonely man whose story had finally been witnessed. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I just looked at him and whispered the words he had needed to hear for a century. "You are not alone, Elias." A single spectral tear seemed to roll down his weathered cheek. A faint, sad smile touched his lips. He had been seen, he had been heard, and that was all he had ever wanted. The relief vessel arrived the next morning to a calm sea and a clear sky. I gave them my report on the equipment, but I never filed a report on Elias Thorne. How could I? When they asked how the solitude was, I just told them I was never really alone. As the boat pulled away from the rock, I looked back at the tall, lonely lighthouse, standing guard over the sea. And just for a moment, on the wind, I heard it. A whistle. But it wasn't his sad, mournful sea shanty anymore. It was the tune I had been humming to myself all week while I worked. A simple, modern, cheerful tune. My tune? He wasn't gone. He just wasn't lonely anymore. And I have a feeling that every keeper, every scientist, every soul who ever spends a night on that rock will leave a little piece of their own music behind. A growing chorus to keep the whistler company.